Hello, everyone, and welcome to Unfound Live for September 23rd of 2024. Got a fantastic show tonight, and in fact, some sad breaking news within the last hour that I have to talk about. And I have to admit, on this particular piece of news, I'm a little late to the party on it. But we'll be breaking that news tonight. But as you can see in the title of the show tonight, 70 years solved. The Morphew DA trouble is something I actually meant to cover last week or the week before, but I forgot to be honest, even though Assistant Sherifff had let me know about it. And then there is this bizarre story about a sheriff going into a judge's chambers and just shooting the judge to death. I think it happened in Kentucky. So I'm hoping to get to those stories before we're done tonight. But there is certainly a lot of stuff to cover tonight. Since we last got together, I got 3 letters from Steve Panky. He continues to answer my questions that I sent him after the Oxygen Network show came out. So I'm going to read what I can. Like I said, as I stated last week, I'm sure there are going to be things that he writes that I can't say what he wrote because they go after certain people, let's just say, and I'm staying away from that stuff until I have a factual basis to read those answers. So I've gotten 3 letters from him, and I've gone through them, and I've figured out what I can read and what I can't read. He's answering the questions. Whether you want to believe him or not, that's up to you. But so I got a lot to cover, and I got 2 hours to do. It's kind of like, what is that song from Smokey and the Bandit? I got a long way to go and a short time to get there. Kind of that kind of deal. So we'll see if I can get to everything, including the things that are in the title of the show for tonight. As you are watching tonight, please give this video, this live show, a thumbs up. Do that, please. If you are new to the live show, please subscribe to the channel, share it with other people, do what you got to do there. And if you are listening to this as a podcast, September 24th and onward, whatever podcast application, it would be nice if you could give this podcast a nice review on there as well. And maybe even think about making time on Monday night when the show airs live at 9 p.m. Eastern, unless there are other circumstances. But most of the time it happens right crisply at 9 p.m. Eastern on Mondays. And it's been on Mondays for a little while now. If you've been with the live show long enough, you know it used to be on Wednesdays for several years. And then was it last year or the year before I moved it to Mondays? And I still say to myself, that was a very smart thing to do. I don't care that Monday Night Football is on this time of year or not. It was still smart to move this to Monday. So let's see who is in here. And I'll just jump in to the deep end with all of this. And we'll cross our fingers on getting this all done. Because like I said, I got a lot to do. Hello, Karen. Karen gets in first tonight. Wow, she was like 40 minutes early. Look at you, Karen. Everything good to see you, Tracy. How are you? Nephew Charles, what's going on? It won't be too long. We'll be seeing each other down here in the beautiful state of Florida. Lisa, she is back from vacation. Good to be back on the live show. I'm feeling the good vibes there, Lisa. And who else is here? Ashley. Hello, Ashley. How are you? Kathy. Good to see Kathy. Tracy, good evening to you. Sarah, good to see you, and thank you for the emails, Sarah, with suggestions. I did get your email. Thank you there. Mary Jane, one of the newest people in our think tank from just over like the last month. If you'd like to join the think tank, patreon.com/unfound podcast. Taylor, otherwise known as D, is in the chat. I do want to talk a little bit about, I got together with D and some other people on Friday for about an hour on a live show. I'm going to talk about that. Ashley asks, is there an update on the Ashley degree case? I really don't know, Ashley. I talked about that last week, and I have to admit that that was not on my agenda this week to check into any of that. There very well may be, but not, I don't know. Yeah, I'm still not used to Monday nights. I'm very used to Monday nights. Yeah, Charles, thumbs up. You have COVID, Ashley, man. I'm sorry to hear that. A woman I know here that I'm friends with, I think she told me she just got COVID for the first time, I think, in August, I think. I have to tell you, I guess I've had it, but I haven't done any tests to prove one way or the other. I really don't know. Hazel coming to us from the Big NZ down under New Zealand. Doing all right. Tracy is another Florida resident. Good to hear. Good to hear that, Tracy. And Ashley says, I've heard that there is. It very well may be, Ashley. I don't know about Ashley degree. It's just like I said, not really. You might have to go out there and find that out for yourself, Ashley, by doing a Google search. Stephanie, what's going on? D says, I was told I fangirl too much, so I'm just going to sit here and keep my mouth shut. All right, D. Any update on the Jeff Nichols case, Tracy? I don't think that we've had any updates, unfortunately, on Jeff's disappearance since it aired way back in 2018. Maybe we have, but that just nothing. I don't know if Jeff has ever made an update episode yet. You know, it's just the way it goes sometimes. It's very sad. Mary Jane says, I just had COVID, my first time, 101 fever for 10 days. Wow. All right. Well, I certainly have not had anything like that since 2020, although I have had some ins and outs with some sicknesses over the since then, mainly when I'm in Pennsylvania, by the way. You know, I got sick a couple times over the last 2 years when I went up to see my dad. I don't know what that is, but I don't know if I had COVID. I've never been tested for it, so I don't know. Well, you knew Jeff Nichols. You dated him many years ago. Wow, Tracy. That is something. Of course, Tracy, you do know that his wife/ex-wife and her family are the best suspects in his disappearance. I'm sure you know that. All right, as far as what's going on with me since all of you saw me last, this was not a good trivia week. On Wednesday, my team did not come in first. We won 4 weeks in a row on Wednesdays. And then on Wednesday, this past Wednesday, I forget what place we actually finished in, but we got the final question right, but a lot of other teams did as well. And so we are not in the playoffs. We missed being in the playoffs by 15 points, and it's like razor thin margins. I mean, like, we had like 1,000 some points, and when you miss that spot by like 15 points, you can just tell how close it was. And it didn't help that all of our team couldn't make it there past Wednesday. There were only 4 of us there. That didn't help. But what the funny thing was is when this all came out the next day, when the standings were put up and it showed that we would not be in the playoffs this coming Wednesday, there was some trash talking going on from some other teams. Now, granted, I guess I was the first one to start the trash talking amongst the teams. And when my team did not make the playoffs, these other teams surely noticed that. And so they came back, not anything vicious or anything, but it's obvious to me that all these other teams were keeping a very close eye on us and that they were very happy that we did not make the playoffs. Now, the reason we didn't make a playoffs is because we didn't even start getting any points to like week 4. So we gave practically all the other teams like a 400 point head start. And we still only missed the playoffs by 15 points because we kicked butt. Once we started getting points, we got a lot of them. So there was some people that had some things to say. And all I can say is that is not going to stop my trash talking. We win quite a bit. It's obvious that these other teams are worried about us. It's obviously obvious that they're keeping an eye on us. They don't want us in the playoffs because they know how much that we win when we, it's like we either win or we don't come close to winning at all. Very hit and miss. But there isn't any other team there that's won 4 weeks in a row. In fact, I don't even think there's a team that's even won 3 weeks in a row there. And we've had 2 perfect scores this year. I mean, we've done a lot. It's just this past 12 weeks of the season, we started off very, very, very poorly. And still, we missed it getting into the playoffs by like that much. So I just have to live with it for now. But I'm hoping for good things when the next season starts, not this Wednesday, but the week and 2 days from now, and that will go until the end of the year. As far as me playing by myself, I went and played Saturday night, and I think I was in 5th place out of about 15 teams going to the final question, and I missed the final question, and so I finished way, 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 way back. Once again, I started out very slowly, and then I think, except for the final question, I think I answered I got correct the last 12 answers. So I moved up from like 13th out of 15 up to like 5th. But I missed the final question, so it really didn't matter. Probably could have done a little better, but if you can't get the final question, then it really doesn't matter. So, in fact, you might remember it about 6 weeks ago or something like that. After I came back from Pennsylvania, I was over there. And I was actually leading going to the final question and didn't get it right. So a bunch of teams passed me up. So I'm pretty good on my own. I'm pretty good on my own. But if you don't know the final question, then there's not much you can do. There's Hazel. Yes. Dang it. I'm quite invested in your trivia team, Hazel. Me too, Hazel. Me too. And hello, Stella. Good to see you, Stella, coming to us. And Kelly says, I have yet to get COVID. I don't know. I'm open to the idea that I've had it and just maybe one of those sicknesses that I have was actually it, and they just didn't get a very powerful version of it or something. I don't know. And I don't plan on getting tested if I've had it or not. That seems like that topic has come and gone at this point. So that's what's going on in trivia. We still get to show up on Wednesday night. We still get to compete, but there's like the playoffs going on at the same time as the regular game. So even if we win on Wednesday night, we'll get like the free coupons, but those 5 playoff teams will be paying for $100 cash. We won it last, like in whenever that was in June. We won the $100 in June. No chance to win it this time. Other than that, I have been going to the gym. I've been getting up at like 8 in the morning. I've been going and practicing my throwing. That's going pretty well. I was out there this morning, but I couldn't go to the gym today because I had a phone call to make, or the person was calling me. But what I do is I get up at 8. I get over to the park at about 8:30. I throw for an hour. And then by the time I get there, get back here and everything, it's about 10 o'clock. I'll go down to the gym and work out from like 10 for about 45 minutes. And then I'll come up here and I'll take a shower, everything. Then I'll do my singing practice. And then I will start doing Unfound work and I'll finally eat for the day. That is my schedule, my new schedule these days. So I've gone from a not getting up until like 11 a.m. guy to getting up at 8 a.m. and getting a lot of stuff done before 11 a.m. And we'll see how long I can keep that up. But it's good being getting back to the gym. And I think also when it comes to my disc golf playing, I think I'm finally taking it seriously after maybe a while of just going through the motions in some ways. So I'm really just going back to basics, going back to totally retooling my throw, making sure I'm doing it the right way instead of trying to play disc golf with bad form and everything. So we'll see how it works out. Of course, I keep all of you posted on that. And I'm always very honest about how I play and how I don't, if I don't play well, then I'm honest about it. D asks, have you had the shot? Yes, I did get the shots. D, I had got I forget even which one it was. I got the first round, but I did not get the second round. I guess that would have been in 2021 sometime, right? Yeah, next time, Hazel. Stella, I think it was the anniversary of Jamie Peterson's disappearance the other day. So sad she hasn't been found yet. Yeah, that's a Pittsburgh area disappearance. And I did see that, Stella. You are correct about that. Mind of Monsters. What a name. What a name. Hello, Mind. And Kelly, you are very generous. What Kelly has done there is contributing to the show tonight by hitting the super chat button. If you're watching on YouTube, you can hit the little green button there at the bottom of the chat under the chat box, and you can contribute to what we do here. And so thank you so much, Kelly. You're very generous. Thank you for doing that tonight. Everybody else can do that as well by hitting the green. I think it's in green now. It was gray. It was white over the past years. I think it's actually in green now. So it's that little green box with a $sign in it. So thank you so much, Kelly. Thank you very much. All right, let's get to the true crime section of tonight's show. And oh, by the way, I do have 2 questions to answer tonight, and I will fit them in as I go along. Starting here, and this was being that I started the show off 20 minutes ago by stating this. This was breaking news to me. But if you don't know, Steve Panky's ex-wife, Angela Hicks, died a couple weeks ago. And I'm very embarrassed to say that it took me getting a letter from Steve for me to know that. It was a letter I got a few days ago from him, but I didn't open it today because I don't open them right when I get them. I open them on the day that I may talk about them on this live show so they can be fresh in my mind and everything. So I think I got that letter on like Thursday or something, but I didn't open it till this evening. And that's when I found out. But she died on September 7th. So like 2 weeks ago, 16 days ago. And I didn't know, like I said, I got a lot of things going on. So there's just items that there's no way to keep track of that. And so, yes, if you're saying, well, I just saw her on the Oxygen Network show. Yes, you did. But you have to remember that was filmed in December of last year. But she died. and it was in, and I am going to get, Steve did send me 3 letters, and maybe I can just read that to you right now, what he had to say about this. This is what Steve had to say about the death of his ex-wife, Angela. Of course, she did not hold Steve in very high regard. Even whether he killed her, Janelle, or not, I don't think we can necessarily blame Angela for maybe not caring much for her ex-husband, because he is strange. He says that may she rest in peace. I was not a candidate for husband of the year. What I did do was bad enough. Angie deserves honor for being the mother of my children. And he says that he's going to choose to remember the good times, and he says he will not be criticizing her further. Now, you should know some of the letters that he sent me, and I've left those out. And even though she's deceased now, I'm still not going to read what he wrote. He did say some bad things about her. Once again, they're not things that I ever aired publicly. And but he claims right here in this letter that he will not be criticizing her anymore. And so we have that in writing. We'll see if he can stick to that. So there you go. Steve says, I don't know if it's true or not, but he says that now how he found out that she died. Maybe his son told him. That would make sense to me. Of course, they have a son that was murdered back in the 2000s, but they still do have another son, and maybe that son is the one that let him know that happened. So, yeah, that's how I found out, by getting a letter from Steve. And then I went to her Facebook page, and I think it was her sister or somebody who wrote about how she died. Steve does put in his letter how he says she died. I don't know if that's a fact or not. I don't even know if that's important or not. Let's just say it wasn't murder. It wasn't suicide. I think it was from a disease of some type, and I will just leave it at that. She was, she really wasn't that old, 71 years old. And I posted something in the discussion group this evening about her death. Now, you should know, Angela. Now, you should know that early on, when I became involved in the whole Panky situation, the Janelle Matthews murder, Angela and I, got to be pretty good friends. And in fact, she actually became a Patreon supporter, and actually she took part she was even in the think tank. And maybe some of you who are in the think tank here, like Kathy, maybe you remember Angela being in the think tank going way back to like 2019 into 2020. But when she found out, it must have been sometime. It had to have been after the first trial, but between the second trial, because during the first trial in 2021, she wanted to meet up while I was out there in Greeley, Colorado, and that just didn't happen. But sometime after that, before the second trial in October of 22, she and I had a falling out. And she it was after the first trial when Steve, of course, there was a hung jury, that I began to publicly state that, I started to have doubts about Steve's guilt and whether they could actually prove that he killed Janelle. And of course, that's still my standpoint now. And Angela did not like that. And she said as much. And I really can't blame her. I want you to know that. I can't blame her. She has a particular opinion on what Steve did or did not do. And she's the one that was married to him and had to live with him. And we now all know what she had to say about Steve on the stand for both trials. But, I want all of you to know it was never, my position on Steve and everything. It's never been personal against her, even though I have stated here and elsewhere that nobody should be judged by what our exes say about us. We should never be judged by what our ex-boyfriends, ex-girlfriends, ex-husbands, ex-wives say about us, especially in a situation where, a person's rights and life and everything are at stake. And like I said, I'm not in the legal business. I'm in the information business. But that she was allowed to get up there and say all these things about Steve without having any factual basis for that, it still bothers me. That's nothing personal against her. But legally, like I said, I just don't know how, she offered up a lot of things that could not be proven otherwise. And I am absolutely of the belief that her getting up there in both trials and saying what she did certainly influenced the jury, and she could have been saying anything. Now, do I believe Steve is a weird guy? Yes. Do I believe he, could be a bad guy? Yes. Do I believe he killed Janelle Matthews? I'm not sure that they proved that. And I wasn't married with him, and I certainly wouldn't. I don't ever care to ever be in the same room as Steve. Yeah, he's weird and everything else. But I just want all of you, I never had any personal ill will toward her. I don't think that she was necessarily a bad person or anything else, but I still stand by what I said, that nobody's character should be judged by what our exes say about us. And I think that she thought, given that I was, my work was used by the prosecution, that I was in the same thinking of her as her. Of course, she certainly believes that Steve killed Janelle. And when she found out that I was not as energetic about it, that's when we had the falling out. Now, you should know that she was the one that started. As you know, by this time, I really don't care if people agree with me, on my standpoint or not. I'm ready to get along with everybody. I'm ready to be friends with everybody. I did not excommunicate Angela because she didn't think like I did. She excommunicated me because I didn't think like she did. I hope that's very clear. But she is now gone. I cannot resist seeing the irony of that show coming out and then her dying just a couple weeks later. That certainly is shocking. And like I said, just that she is deceased, it was shocking to me. And I have to admit, given that I know so many people and know, so many people know that I'm connected to this, it's a little amazing to me that nobody emailed me to tell me this. I had to get it from Steve in a letter, and he's in jail. So I don't know what to think about that. I guess what we're saying here, and you should know, Steve does have an appeal going regarding his conviction in 2022. I guess what we're saying here is if somehow there was a retrial, I get, of course, Angela will not be able to take part, although it may be that her testimony from one of the prior trials could be admitted. Although, like I said, I'm not in the legal business. But I continue to believe that her words in both trials, I guess mainly in the second one, I think they were one of the strong points that caused the jury to convict Steve, even though there was no physical evidence and everything else that I've already been through over the last couple of years talking about this. So Angela Hicks, deceased. Kat says, well, I didn't know that she was 66. I think Steve told me she was 71, Kathy. He said, oh, no, maybe. Oh, that's an 8. You're right. I looked at that. I thought it was a 3. That is an 8. So, yeah, she was only 66. I read that as 1953. He wrote, he put her birth date in the letter. I read that as a 53. No, that's a 58. You are correct, Kathy. I misread it. So, yeah, 66 years old. Very sad. Rest in peace, Angela. Very odd timing indeed, Amy says. Yeah. I don't know. And I even tonight, when I found out, I even emailed the guy that I know from the production company who did the Oxygen Network show that is now on Peacock. And I emailed him to ask him if he knew, because he didn't let me know. Not that he's maybe obligated to, but you'd think that that might have, maybe he thinks I already knew. I didn't. So I emailed him tonight asking him, did he know this? I'm guessing he probably does. But hello, Deborah. What's going on with you? Good to see you, Deborah. You don't have to apologize. We're just talking, Deborah. If you don't know that Steve Panky's ex-wife, Angela, died back on September 7th. I'm just finding out today. 66 years old. Yes, the woman who appeared in the Oxygen Network show. She died over 2 weeks ago. So that's what I was talking about. So, wow. But I just thought, I've not talked about Friday's poll yet with Hazel. We're going to get to this. I'm trying to go in order of importance tonight, Hazel, and I certainly had to talk about that first. So I just want everybody to know, I don't think that I've ever really talked publicly about Angela and what happened between the two of us. How, when it first started, she and I were talking all the time over Messenger, and we actually talked on the phone. And then, like I said, sometime after the first trial, but before the second one, she and I had a falling out, and I had no communication with her since like 2022. And I've explained that. So there you go. Yeah. All right, Deborah. Yeah. So there's that. Moving on, another piece of importance, although this is a technical aspect of the podcast. I know many of you do listen to the episodes through iTunes or Apple Podcasts. Something went on Friday. I haven't got an explanation. I spoke with my podcast provider, Megaphone, today, and they could offer no explanation. But something happened when the podcast got uploaded on Friday that, it only got like 1/4 of the downloads on Friday that it usually does. And it was a longtime listener, Paula, who posted something, hey, what's going on here? And I had to look into it, and I was really stressed out about it yesterday. And what was weird is I finally got around to just sending in a ticket to Apple Podcasts. Now, you should know, I have nothing to do with iTunes or Apple Podcasts at all. I don't use either of them. I'm a Spotify guy. I wish all of you would use Spotify instead. That would simplify so many things, but I know iTunes is, dominates the podcasting world, although Spotify, of course, does a lot as well, and a lot of podcasts are on both. But I'm telling you, I think if you gave Spotify a chance, my opinion is it's so much easier to use than iTunes or Apple Podcasts. It's not even close, but that's me. And I have an Android phone, but I am Apple literate. I'm doing this show on a MacBook and I do all the podcasts. I'm very Apple literate. I can still say that Spotify is better than iTunes. Anyway, it was weird that I sent in a ticket or a complaint. It wasn't a complaint, but something's not right here about, and it got fixed in like 15 minutes. All of a sudden it was there and it was like it never happened. So for all of you out there who get your weekly podcast episode through iTunes and something went wrong and you didn't get it, trust me that I uploaded it at the right time, but that was an Apple/iTunes problem. But finally, everything did get figured out yesterday. So it wasn't you. It was not anything having to do with your phone or anything else or any updates or anything. Something on Friday happened. I don't know. Whether I ever will find out, I have no idea. So, but if I find out, I'll let all of you know. It wasn't my fault. So that's what happened on Friday. It's all fixed now. Hopefully it'll never happen again. But as I said, I really don't go to iTunes ever. Because like I said, I have no reason to go there. But because I had to go there, I was stunned to find out that Unfound has like 1,400 reviews on iTunes. Honestly, I'm going to be totally honest about this. This is total honesty. I think the last time I went to iTunes and saw that number, there were like 60 reviews. I'm not joking. And so that just shows you the last time that I was even on iTunes. Long time ago. Now it has 1,400 reviews. I think it has like a 4-star rating out of 5, whatever. I realize that, let's just say Unfound has its share of 1-star reviews. And of course, the thing about iTunes is people can review a podcast and never listen to it. So the reviews don't mean anything. This isn't like Amazon where to review a product, you have to buy it. Not the same situation on iTunes. Anybody can review anything at any time. And so the reviews don't mean anything. Now on Spotify, Unfound's rating is a 4.4 out of 5. Just so you know, and I forget how many reviews have been done there. Not 1,400. But somebody emailed me today, given that they knew about this Apple iTunes problem, and she was writing, "I can't believe that your rating's only this and everything." And I just told her, I don't care. I really don't care about those things. Like I said, if anybody can review it, it doesn't mean anything anyway. And I'm much prouder of the fact of what the podcast has done in helping in the assistance, the resolution of some disappearances. And of course, appearing in a murder trial twice and being able to go to speak to schools and earning the respect of people within law enforcement like Dr. Telesco and Julia Kali, of course, FBI agent from the consult and people like that. That to me is, my idea of doing a good job. Reviews on iTunes are not. I talk about it. I tell you, go give it a 5-star review. And I know I talk about all that. I know you love to do that. And I appreciate it. But I want you to know that when I think about doing a good podcast, making an impact is more important than getting great reviews. Whereas my opinion is there are a lot of people out there just worried about the reviews. That's my impression. But I was just shocked there was 1,400 people reviewed Unfound. Like I said, though, it could be a lot of those people don't even listen to the podcast. What are you going to do? Like I said, it's not like Amazon. So there you go. Spotify is better. I think, Sarah, my opinion, yes, it is. Now, is it better if you have an iPhone or something? I don't know. I've never had an iPhone, but I've used Spotify for a very long time, even before I started Unfound. And it just seems like to me to be a lot easier. It just seems to be, more user friendly and just makes more sense to me. And that's what I'm looking for. It was not your fault, D. Deborah uses Spotify. Amy uses Spotify. D 32 and at least then it's only 18. Stella, Spotify. Hazel, Spotify. Hello, Michelle. How are you? Yeah, D loses Spotify. I think it's better. Sarah, maybe give it a shot. I agree with you about the rating also. Thank you, Deborah. I appreciate that. Like I said, if you've not yet given Unfound a rating, whatever application you use, give it a fantastic review. I appreciate it. I'm just saying that when I start thinking about my vision of what we're trying to do here at Unfound, it's about earning the respect of, of course, you, the audience, and the, of course, the guests, most importantly, but also these people who have done law enforcement for a long time, who I respect in turn. I respect them. They respect me, even though I've not been in law enforcement, and they look at what I'm doing here, what my assistants are doing and everything, and say, you know what? That's a classy operation. That's most important to me. Amy says Spotify is very user-friendly. I agree. All right. So hopefully we'll never have an Apple Podcast problem ever again. And I'll keep saying it. If you're using iTunes, I ask you to give Spotify a chance. Moving on. Hazel was wondering about the poll. This would be the Christopher McNeil poll. Here you go, Hazel. The poll question was, is it a coincidence that Chris went missing at the same time he was having this relationship problem? 100% of you said, nope, it's not a coincidence, meaning 100% of the respondents in the discussion group think there is causation and correlation between the two. In the think tank, pretty much the same. The think tank that is done every Sunday evening. As you can see at the bottom of the screen, patreon.com /Unfound podcast. And then me for the blog that I write there. I also decided that this relationship, although it's one of, I think, a few things, I also think that it's not a coincidence, although I think that you could put a lot of other points in that question and they would be true as well. For example, is it a coincidence that he went missing while also having a trial date coming up? I think the answer is also no, that's not a coincidence. So there's a lot of different facts I could have used in that, and I think that they are all relevant to it. So there seems to be, at least the public perception, is that there is some correlation and causation between his disappearance and this problem Lee was having with his girlfriend / ex-girlfriend, Sydney. That does not mean it's murder, although I know a lot of people automatically think that. Very well could be that, he was down and out about it and took off and harmed himself or something. So not a coincidence, according to just about everybody who took part in any poll anywhere. So there you go, Hazel. That was the answer for this week. And of course, before we are done tonight, I will be talking about this Friday's disappearance, where we are having our first guest who is on the continent of Europe. How about that this Friday? And we'll get to that later. All right. Next thing I want to do, being that we just spent some time, we've gone over to a couple other things. Now we have to go back to it. And that is the Panky questions and answer period. And some of you don't know. After I watched the Oxygen Network show, hey, there's Marty. 45 minutes late. Yep, that's just about right for Marty. Hello, Marty. After the Oxygen Network show came out on August 25th, I watched it. I took some notes and I sent Steve a long list of questions. And 2 weeks ago, I went through all of those questions with you. I'm not going through them again. But last week, I had a chance to read one total answer and one partial answer of the that he gave to a couple of the questions. Well, like I said, since last Monday, I got 3 letters from him. So we are going to answer. I'm going to read his answers to some of the other questions. Once again, these are questions that popped up because of things that I watched on the show. Maybe things that I didn't know or confused me or something like that. All right. Things that I know that I had never asked Steve before. Once again, as is always the case with Steve, you can choose to believe him or not believe him. All I'm doing is asking questions, reading the answers. However, I will not read any answers in which he makes allegations about somebody and there's no facts. I'm not saying there aren't facts, but I haven't had a chance to look into that for myself. For example, like what I said before, he's said some things about his ex-wife, Angela, that I've left out of some of what he's written to me because I'm not getting into that. Just like she could have been making things up, he, of course, could be making things up as well. So I'm staying away from that. Well, likewise, he said things about other people as well. And because I don't have any factual information to back these things up, I have to stay away from it. And that will certainly be the situation tonight. So I sent him a bunch of questions. I read a couple of those answers last week. And here we go now. I asked him a question. Once again, this is only going to see, you're only going to know what I'm talking about if you've watched the 2-part show. It's now on the Peacock streaming service if you want to check it out. During the show, it brought up about how he wrote that novel. And it was portrayed that the novel, written sometime in the 90s by Steve, kind of paralleled the disappearance, at least at the time it was a disappearance, the disappearance of Janelle. So I asked Steve, and I've never asked him this question before. I asked him, why did you write that novel? Here is his answer. I wrote Graveyards, the Untold Story, Fact or Fiction in 1993. From what I assumed in 1993. So this would have been roughly 8 to 9 years after Janelle went missing. So I wrote Graveyards, the Untold Story, Fact or Fiction in 1993, from what I assumed in 1993. Beyond my control, pages were edited out, making the printed edition disjointed and of little probative value. Had Janelle's body been discovered in rural Bellevue before January 7th, 1985, I would not have said or written anything. He keeps bringing up this Bellevue question, and I'm going to have to ask him about that. He's brought this up a couple times, and I keep making a note. I need to ask him about that. I don't know why he keeps bringing it up, I'll admit. So like I said, there's still so much territory to mine with this guy. So he just wrote it based on what he knew about the disappearance in 1993. And I didn't even know that it got printed edition. I didn't even know that it was out there. I didn't know that, of course, this was before Amazon or anything else. So, if you're going to get something out there, it actually had to be in a print edition. So what he's saying about this other stuff, I have no idea. But I don't mind reading it because it's not salacious. It's not slandering anybody or anything like that. So once again, why did you write the novel? Answer, I wrote Graveyards, the Untold Story, Fact or Fiction in 1993, what I assumed in 1993. Beyond my control, pages were edited out, making the printed edition disjointed and of little probative value. Had Janelle's body been discovered in rural Bellevue before January 7th, 1985, maybe he's talking, maybe that's the area where a body was actually eventually found. Is that the Bellevue area? I forgot. I would not have said or written anything. Okay, so that is the answer to that. Everybody's saying hi to Marty. Marty, Panky is an interesting individual to say the least. Yeah, he certainly is, maybe on purpose or by accident. So the next question I asked him, this was something that came up in once again in the show. This was not something covered in the first trial, but it was covered in the second trial. And I get to use the woman's name because it was used in court and on the show. So I'm not leaking any information or anything like that. I asked him straight out, did you rape Deb Moon? This is an allegation from 1977 that he had taken her somewhere and raped her. And there were charges filed, but so question, did you, because this came out in trial number 2, why they were allowed to do this, I don't know. And he says, no, never happened. In 1981, then DA Stan Peake wanted me to testify against Steve Adams in an unrelated felony case. Mr. Peake wrote me a letter stating Debbie Moon's rape allegation probably never happened. Turned down Crime Stoppers. And he says, Steve says, I turned down Crime Stoppers reward money and still refused to testify, claiming pastoral privilege. There's that pastoral privilege thing again that he ended up using with Janelle's disappearance as well. This letter still exists in the late Steve Adams' case file. In the Debbie Moon case, I'm considered innocent, according to the 1981 then DA. And once again, never spent a day in jail, never community service, no fines, nothing. Yet this got admitted into the second trial. So he's saying, once again, did you rape Deb Moon? Never happened. He also went on to say the Oxygen Network failed to interview me or do due diligence by reading the trial discovery materials. So those are 2 questions that I asked him. Those are the answers. You can choose to believe him or not. Being that those topics were covered in the show. Once again, I just want to say it again so everybody understands. These are questions that popped up into my mind after watching the show. This has nothing to do with anything he said to me in the first trial. This has nothing to do with anything that I experienced while I was out there or talking to anybody else. All of these questions have nothing to do but with the show that came out in August of 2024 that is now available on Peacock. Next question. I asked him, did you know Detective Cash was in the same class as Janelle's older sister? This is something that I did not know. This is something that came out in the show. And in fact, did they even put a picture up in the show that showed both of them together or something like that? Detective Cash and Janelle's older sister were in the same class or knew each other in high school in Greeley. And I asked him, did you know that? First of all, he corrected me saying Jennifer is Janelle's older stepsister. And what Steve says in 2019, Jim Matthews told a newspaper reporter Jennifer and Cash shared high school classes. And Steve says that was news to me. So Steve is saying he had no idea until 2019 that Detective Cash and Jennifer knew each other going way back to high school. Whether they kept in touch over all these years, I have no idea. I'm not that. I'm just wondering, did he know going back to school that they knew each other? Steve says he did not know this until 2019. And of course, Detective Cash at that point would be on his radar because Detective Cash was one of the people who went to talk to Steve starting in April and then again. And I think Detective Cash was one of them who eventually arrested Steve in 2020. But Steve is saying he had no idea the connection between Janelle's older stepsister and Cash until 2019. I asked him the next question regarding that topic because this does seem to me to be at least a little conflict of interest. My opinion, I'm not saying there was any malfeasance or any corruption or anything like that. It just kind of caught my attention. So I asked him, why didn't your lawyers challenge this? Steve's answer, my lawyers didn't challenge much, if ever. That's why I'm in prison, he said. That's his words. My lawyer didn't challenge much, if ever. That's why I'm in prison. The prosecution testimony often contradicted the discovery. All right. So he's complaining about his lawyers, I guess. And remember, Steve testified in trial number 1. He did not testify in trial number 2. And really, I have to admit, in the Oxygen Network show, they kind of blurred that. They kind of did make it look like he testified in trial number 2. He did not. Anytime you see Steve up on the stand in that show, that's from trial number 1, not from trial number 2, even though it's not edited that way. That's how editing can throw people off. That's why we don't do editing here at Unfound of interviews. So why didn't your lawyers challenge this? My lawyers didn't challenge much, if ever. That's why I'm in prison. The prosecution testimony often contradicted the discovery. And I'm going to get to the discovery materials here in a bit. Speaking which. So I asked him then to follow up on that question, is that not a conflict of interest? I wanted his opinion on that. He says, in a large population area like New York City, it would be considered a conflict. In a small population areas, people are often acquainted with victims. I can't argue with that. That is true. However, after that, I can't read anything more that he says after that, because then he starts going into his theories about people there and all sorts of things, and I'm not touching any of that. I know what it says, and nobody else does, and you can't see it through the screen. Let me see if there is anything else here, though, that I can read. There's just stuff here that I just really don't want to get into. And once again, it's going into the discovery materials that I haven't seen. Like I said, I'm going to get to that in a moment. Let's see on page number 2. And I've mentioned, so I don't mind mentioning this. What continues to bother Steve, and I've brought this up before, but he mentions it here toward the letter. Once again, I know many of you think he killed Janelle. Fine by me. But what he keeps bringing up is, what are the odds that they come and talk to me? You know, it's been 35 years. Out of nowhere, they come to talk to me in April of 2019. And just so happens Janelle's body's found 2-3 months later. Now, if this were over the course of a disappearance that was 6 months old, even I would say that's not unusual. But we do have to think about that. They don't talk to Steve for all of these years. They go talk to him, and I've already stated they went to talk to him because they wanted to talk to him about Russ Ross. And they came away thinking, man, this Steve guy, maybe he's our best suspect. And then 3 months later, her remains are found out in that field. Steve, only Steve knows whether he killed Janelle or not. But the way he writes, this is what continues to bother him. And then he goes on to say, Oxygen and other national networks haven't interviewed me or read the discovery materials. And so there you go. That is him answering some of my questions. I will have to check and see if he's answered all of my questions that maybe he has. But as I read this, I just have more questions. So I might as well send him some more. But I think he's answered most, if not all, from my questions that arose from watching the show. I'll check that, and I'll let you know what I think about that next week. Now, on the topic, let's see what everybody's saying here. Deborah says he hit that statement out of the park. I don't recall his lawyers challenging much either. There might, Deborah, once again, I was only in the courtroom for my testimony. Okay, I was only out there for that. That's it. And in addition, I'm probably not going to get the transcripts because I've had my assistant Eric look into this, and it's just cost prohibitive. It just is. I really have to question how much money I really want to put into getting all that information. Instead, hold on a second here. My computer's not going to die here, is it? Hold on a second. All right, can you hear me now? There we go. Can you hear me now? Yes, no, close. I have to edit this out. Can you hear me now? Yes. All right, great. Let's continue. All right. I'm having a battery issue. Even though it's plugged in, I'm having a battery issue. I think I'm on the edge of having to get a new MacBook. I think. We'll have to see. MacBooks are not cheap. All right, everybody can hear me. Thank you for everybody checking in. I'm just glad we didn't get disconnected. But sometimes my MacBook will not run if it's not plugged in. But I'm starting to have plug issues. It's like this thing has been unplugged and plugged in. The connection is getting really loose. And so sometimes it's plugged in, but it's not. And the thing will not run if it's not plugged in because the battery is shot on this MacBook because it's like 7 years old or something like that. So there you go. Thank you, everybody. All right, there you go. All right, so the discovery. So you've heard it so many times. I've read a lot of Steve's stuff here on the live show over the last, since last summer. I mean, I've been writing back and forth with him for over a year. I have tried to get the discovery materials, and I have my assistant Eric on that job, and he's doing a fantastic job. He's also working on a few other things. But so what I did was Eric is in charge of it, but I'm the one that, of course, I'm the boss, so I have to sign off on these things, and I decide what we're going to do and everything. And I just give Eric some tasks. So I filled out the form, signed it. he's the one that emailed it to the office of the district attorney, of course, Michael Rourke. And this is the response. And this is all by the law. I'm not reading this. He's certainly going by the law, even though I wish he wouldn't. This is regarding the discovery request dated September 13th of 2024. Dear Mr. Denzel, I am in receipt of your discovery request dated September 13th, 2024, in which you have requested discovery from 2020 CR 1816 People versus Panky. Please note that you are not entitled to discovery under the Colorado rules of criminal procedure because you are not a party to the case. He's absolutely correct. Of course, he knows the law. But you should know in some states, the public can see discovery materials. All right, so just understand that. So my request is not crazy. All right, because the thing is, if Steve's going to keep bringing up all this discovery stuff, then I would like to see it. Then I would actually like to see it for myself. And this is why I've had to tiptoe around some of the things that he's written over the past year, because he says, well, this is in the discovery, that's in the discovery, they wouldn't allow this in, they didn't allow that in, and everything else. And he says it's all in these discovery materials. Well, I'd like to see that for myself. So, secondly, that's the first paragraph. Second paragraph. I also reviewed your request under the Colorado Criminal Justice Records Act, CRS 24-72-301. Disclosure of criminal justice records are discretionary with the custodian of records. In my review, I've determined that release of these records to you is inter alia, contrary to the public interest, as you are an endorsed to you is contrary to the public interest, as number one, you're an endorsed witness in this matter. And of course, because I was in the trial. And number two, the defendant's appeal is still pending in the Colorado Court of Appeals. Do not hesitate to contact my office. Should you have any other questions or concerns, I may just do that. I'm going to sit on this for a while. We're in no rush. So I want you to know, so anytime you hear me talk about, when I've read that Steve says it's in the discovery materials, it's in the discovery materials, it's in the discovery materials, there are things that I can't say regarding that because I don't know what the discovery stuff says because I haven't seen it. And the last thing, given that Steve, well, sometimes he has problems with the truth, I'm not going to go very deep into anything that he says is in the discovery materials, but I haven't seen it for myself. If he answered, of course, some of these things that I asked about regarding the show, but I've seen the show. Even though maybe he hasn't seen the show, I have seen the show. And so these are questions that I ask, he answers them. And like I said, even with that, there are certain things that he says in some of these answers that I can't read because, well, like I said, as I stated before, they're salacious, they could be slanderous, they could be this, they could be that, they could be the other. And like I said, I'm avoiding all of that. I'm not, I'm sure he would love for me to read all of it. I mean, that's why he's writing it, but I'm not going to do that. And whether he knows I'm reading all of these or not, only partial parts of these letters, maybe he has somebody out there who's listening or watching and then reporting back to him about what I'm talking and saying, because I'm not telling him what I'm saying. All right. I told him, you write stuff, I'll read it, and I'll determine. But I'm not telling him what I'm reading and not reading. But I have the stack of letters here for the day, hopefully, when I can get my hands on those discovery materials to find out if Steve Panky's a liar about this stuff or not. But for now, the DA says I can't have those materials, and it seems he's following the law, so I can't really complain about that. Is there another way to get the discovery materials? I really don't know. So like I said, I'm not going to jump to conclusions on this. I'm not going to think that this is over. And I, in even to agree with DA Rourke, even though he and I have had our disagreements about things, it is right that there is an appeal going on. So if the standard is I can't release discovery because just for the simple fact there's an appeals process going on, then yeah, that's that. That's that. Then that is not a discretion type of thing. That's just a fact. There's appeal going on. I can't release it because of that. And so that's that. I totally get it. But on the other hand, I'm not going to let this issue die because I'm very, 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 very motivated on seeing if Steve's telling the truth about all this stuff or not. So, yes, sorry. Amy says my devices have been quirky lately too. Yeah. So no, I blame the full moon. Sarah says I don't understand what he's talking about, Ed. Talking about concerning what part, Sarah? What part? You will have to be a little more specific with me. I don't understand what he is talking about. Who is he and what part do you mean? And I'll be happy to answer that. So I've gotten response, and if DA Rourke is out there, thank you for getting back to me in a timely manner. I appreciate it. I realize that you and I don't see eye to eye on this. I hope you see that I'm trying to go about this in a professional way. You know I have my doubts. I'm trying to be professional about it, and I think that's all you should care about. I'm not mad about your letter. I understand your standpoint. Of course, you also have to understand that I'm going to try to get the discovery materials one way or the other, because that's what reporters do. So there is that. And Sarah, once again, if you, I would like a little more specificity on your question, Sarah, I would love for you to answer that question for you. All right, going down. Speaking of questions, I have two to answer, and I'm going to answer them right now. One of them is from Glenn, who can't watch tonight because he's working the ER. And then I have a question from Stephanie, which is a question I've gotten many, many times. Glenn asks, I know you would not name cases that you feel may never be solved, but could you give general characteristics of what you feel are the types of cases that may not be solved? What do they generally have in common? This is a fantastic question. Glenn, you are so smart. Fantastic question. 8 years in, I've never been asked this. Here is my perception to Glenn and to anyone else. My perception is I didn't go down through all of this Unfound's disappearances or anything like that. But just taking a couple minutes to think about this question, the first kind of disappearance that popped into my head are any disappearances where there is a reason to believe that the missing person went into a river. All right, and all of you can go back and determine what I don't want to name any names. And I certainly could be wrong about some of them. Of course, we've covered many disappearances where missing people were last seen near a river, or their vehicle was found near a river, or something like that. Many. That does not necessarily mean they went into the river, but you got to believe the number or amount of disappearances that we've featured like that. We have to believe at least some of those people went into those rivers, and those are the first ones that pop into my head. And I think we can see why. If the person did go into the river, whether by accident or a suicide, or maybe they were hallucinating or something like that, they go into the river, they're gone. They're gone. Now, if it's a smaller river, that's different. But, you know, we've talked about the Mississippi. We've talked about the Rio. We've talked about the Colorado River. We've talked about the Delaware River. All of these rivers with considerable flow and current, and they're long and everything else. That has to be number one. has to be number one. Now, on top of that, another kind would, of course, be any murders where we think that the suspect or suspects are fairly sophisticated and might have really thought this through, and we can believe there is circumstantial evidence to think that they put some work into this to try to make this happen. Like I said, no, I'm not going to give any names. But once again, you have to know Unfound's disappearances fairly well. But I know there are some that also pop into my head that are like that as well, where we believe there was foul play, and we could be convinced that there was some planning involved beforehand. So before the disappearance ever happened, there were things that were stacking up. There was planning going on behind the scenes. We're going to do this to this person. We're going to make this person disappear, and we're going to put this person here so he or she will, never be found. Certainly those ones would also be high on my list. Now, how many of those are that has Unfound covered? Not sure. Like I said, I've not gone through everyone to do that in preparation for tonight's live show. However, I can tell you eventually, when this whole database that I've talked about once in a while, it'll be much clearer. These kinds of answers will be easier to go through. So those are a couple kinds, Glenn, and the rest of you that come to mind. Anywhere there is a reason to believe that the person disappeared near a river, and at least some of those people went into the river, certainly there's that. And then anywhere there seems to be a foul play angle in which planning was part of it. In contrast to a lot of disappearances where we believe it was spur of the moment, like a crime of passion where somebody has to figure out to do something very quickly. It's more likely that mistakes will be made and they will take the easy way out. And that means eventually the bodies will be found. Now, I will tell you that I've convinced myself after 350 disappearances that we start talking about disappearances that are crimes of passion, spur of the moment, if that's what we believe. I'm inclined to believe that a lot of those missing people are right there on that property. But of course, law enforcement can't legally get on there. And that's where the bodies are. And so what we have to hope for is one day when the suspect dies or somehow is not in control of the property anymore, then you got your shot to go in there and look. Or the person commits another crime like with Dennis Bowman, and that's how Andrea Bowman was found. Whereas ones that are planned, I do not think those types of people would come up with a plan and then dispose of the missing person's remains right on their property. Whereas people who do something spur of the moment and, oh my, what am I going to do? Am I going to put the body in the car? I can't do that. And they just go out in the backyard or something. So Glenn, that is my answer. Great question. I did it without saying, of course we know Andrea Bowman, but everybody, that one's been solved. I didn't use any names of any unsolved disappearances. But those two categories I just named, we've covered quite a few, like both of those. But I can always be surprised. I mean, really, who thought Mary Jane Van Gilder's disappearance was going to be solved? So, The second question is from Stephanie. Maybe you've answered this before. I have. What led you to this idea of starting a podcast on the topic of missing people? I've been through this many times. Stephanie, if you're out there watching tonight, really went through this when I got interviewed by Julia Colley over at the Consult about a month ago. How that all came together. But very quickly, I've always just had an interest in disappearances. And I would say that my interest in them has even grown since I started this podcast. Fascinated by them. Fascinated by them. Always, since I was a little kid, 7 years old. And then I guess the technology just caught up with my interest. Podcasting became a thing. And here we are, 350 disappearances in. So, Stephanie, oh, you're in here, Stephanie. Oh, good to see you. Hello. Stephanie, I would really, if you really want a complete answer, go to the Consult podcast on Spotify and listen to the interview that Julia did with me, and that, because that's how the whole entire discussion starts out. That's probably the best way to get that answer. Let's see what everybody is saying. Sarah said, okay. Tanti asked me, Ed, when was the last time you had your eyes checked? Just asking. I see you squinting a lot. Actually, my eyes are fine, pretty much, D. I squint sometimes, maybe just for effect. I can read this fine. I mean, I consider. I think I squint a lot. It's mainly just a facial expression. I think my sister Diane brings this up to me as well, and I always ask her, I can see just fine. How well would you like me to see? When she says that to me. Hazel says, Glenn does ask great questions. I know Ladybird Lake, there may be some. D says. Sarah says the discovery materials. Okay. Sarah, what he means by that is, before a trial ever happens, is the prosecution and the defense, like I said, I'm not a legal expert, but there is a determination of what is going to be allowed in the trial and what is not going to be allowed in the trial. For example, let's just take an outrageous example. Let's say the prosecution, of course, this is not certainly the situation. I'm never going to allege that the prosecution did anything corrupt, illegal, or anything in either of Steve's trials. I don't believe that. But let's just say in a hypothetical situation that the prosecution stole information that it wanted to present in a trial. Of course, this would be something that the defense would challenge, and behind closed doors, before the trial ever starts, the judge would be there looking through all of this, and then the judge gets to determine, oh no, you can't let that into the trial. Come on, guys, you stole it. You got it illegally. You went here, you did this, and then it would be left out. Likewise, if the defense wants to present its own materials, let's say that has a bunch of hearsay stuff about their defendant, and then the prosecution can challenge that. And through this process of discovery, this is what is determined, what is eventually put in front of a jury. They want to make sure that the information put in front of a jury is constitutional, legal, all those words. Okay. So these are but the thing is, you have to understand, in a trial, what you see, that is just a portion of all of the information. And it very well may be that information that is true could not make it into the trial for this reason or that reason. A statement very well may be true, but it's not backed up by anything. It's certainly possible. So this is what is meant by the discovery materials. So what Steve is saying, and like I said, over the course of all these letters, I've left a lot out about this because, once again, I've not seen the materials. He could be making all this stuff up. He has alleged that there is factual information that was presented in discovery by his side, by his attorneys, about certain people that was not allowed into the trial. That's what he's saying. And once again, that's all I can say. I am not going into specifics about who these people are and what was said about them or anything. I'm not touching that. I'm not touching it. But he's made a lot of stories that says this stuff is in the discovery materials, and it was not let in for this reason or that reason or whatever else. Now, of course, he believes the stuff should have been let in, because he believes that this material is true and that it says that he didn't do it, that somebody else did it, and he should not have been considered a suspect. Without me being able to see this material, I really can't make a determination one way or the other. Obviously, the judge said we can't let this stuff in. And really, in the end, that's all that matters. for a trial situation. But we don't do legal legal stuff out here. We do information stuff out here. So makes a lot of claims, and but I think what's important to understand, at least if Steve is telling the truth, which could be a stretch, these are obviously things that his lawyers in both trials tried to get in and they couldn't. So it would lead me to believe that they at least thought there was a possibility that these things were true. And if that's the situation, then I at least want to see what this stuff is. But like I said, at this point, it doesn't seem like I'm going to get to see them. So that is what is meant by the discovery materials. I don't want anybody to think when you see a trial on TV or you experience it, there's probably a lot more information about both the prosecution's case and the defense's case that isn't let in, that very well may be true, but isn't allowed in for this reason or that reason. The only thing that I've said is that I have a hard time understanding how in trial 2 that Debbie Moon's allegation of rape against Steve was allowed to be in it. Because he it was just an allegation. He never spent any time in jail, nothing. So that's the only thing that I would say about any of it. Everything else, I just don't know until I get to see the discovery materials. It very well may be one of these days I do get my hands on those discovery materials and none of what Steve said is true. But being that he has said so much about those discovery materials, about many, many things that are in there, I have to believe at least some of it's in there. Now, whether it's true or not, I would have to make the determination for myself once I read it. If I ever get to read it. I mean, I may meet 100 and get to 100 years old and not get to see it. So there you go. Oh, you're squinting is a thing. It is a thing, Hazel. So let's say I'd have a question for you. I told you that dog bounty hunter, what's to give you Proudfoot family truth serum? Would that cause problem? Truth serum, I think that is that's kind of like lie detector stuff. That's like polygraph stuff. That would cause a problem. I don't think any of that would be allowed in court. There you go, Sarah. That's the best I can do. Once again, I'm not in the legal profession. So those are my answers to the questions tonight. Let's get to the headline stuff. Did you see this guy? Let me read this story to you. It's been out there for a while now. Little boy who was kidnapped. Whoops. Little boy who was kidnapped by a stranger has been found alive and well more than 70 years after his abduction. Now, an elderly man nearing 80, Luis Armando Albino, was just 6 when he was lured from a park in Oakland, California in 1951 by a woman promising to take him to a store to buy candy. Albino had been playing with his older brother, Roger, who was the only witness to the crime, and the boy's mother never saw her son, Luis, again. She died in 2005, unaware of his fate. Despite an enormous search for the missing child at the time, the trail went cold, and the case remained a painful mystery to the family for decades. But a chance DNA test by a relative uncovered an online match with a man living on the other side of the country turned out to be the kidnapping victim. After the abduction, Albino had been flown to the East Coast and raised by a couple there. Albino was originally born in Puerto Rico and had been brought to the U.S. by his parents with his 5 siblings. In the summer of 1950, he was stolen away just months later. In February 1951, he left the park with a woman wearing a bandana who spoke to him in Spanish, according to his then 10-year-old brother. A huge search involving police, soldiers, and from the nearby Oakland Army base, the Coast Guard and the FBI proved unsuccessful. The child's mother, Antonia Albino, never gave up hope and was still raising awareness of the case. Decades after her son vanished, She visited the Police Missing Persons Bureau daily, but eventually these trips dwindled to once a year as she repeatedly received the devastating news that there had been no leads in the case. She always felt he was alive, granddaughter Alida Eloquin, Albino's 63-year-old niece, told the paper. She took that with her to her grave. All this time, the family kept thinking of him. I always knew I had an uncle. We spoke of him a lot. My grandmother carried the original article in her wallet, and she always talked about him. A picture of him was always hung in the family home. It was Eloquin who ended up breaking the case wide open. She did a DNA test in 2020 just for fun. But she was stunned when it returned a 22% match with a man living across the United States, although she was not successful in attempts to contact him to find out more. She renewed her efforts this year after researching more about her uncle's abduction and took old newspaper articles and the DNA results to Oakland police, where investigators agreed it was a significant lead. Albino was located by officers and provided a new DNA sample, which matched with his sister. This time, the match was even stronger, and it confirmed that the man was albino. Eloquin said she and her mother wept upon hearing the news. I grabbed my mom's hand and said, "We found him." I was ecstatic. The FBI brought Albino and some of his relatives to Oakland to meet with his long-lost family in June. He met his niece Eloquin, his sister, and his brother Roger, who had been the last person to see him. They grabbed each other and had a really tight, long hug. They just sat down and talked. Albino revealed he was a retired firefighter and Marine Corps vet who had served in Vietnam. He's also a father and grandfather. Albino has not commented publicly about his remarkable life story, and details about the case and the reunion remain vague. It is unclear whether Albino was given a new name, whether the woman who raised him was the same person who took him from the park, and whether he was aware he had a family who was searching for him. Police say they have now closed the missing persons case, but the FBI are still pursuing the abduction investigation. Hundreds of thousands of children and juveniles are reported missing each year, according to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. The circumstances of disappearance is only recorded about half the time, but in cases where there are, only 0.1% are reported as having been abducted by a stranger. How about that? Happy ending, but we just have to understand, as all of you know, this is very rare. And I am unfortunately under the belief that when this does happen, most of the time when children get abducted, even though we talk about sex trafficking and everything, I have to believe most of the time these people do this with murderous intentions, like with Jacob Wetterman. Now, you may be asking, do you think of any of Unfound's disappearances could be like this one? Certainly a possibility, but I certainly would not want to try to tell you which one. To me, at this point, I don't know how you would ever be able to tell. You know, we talk about Nylene Marshall, Mark Heimbaugh, of course, Mark Wilson, and many other children who we featured. Of course, I try to stay away from those disappearances for a variety of reasons, but I don't even know how you'd even be able to break it down. Well, this child most likely was taken and raised under a new name, and this child was murdered within a day. I don't even know how you do that. I have no idea. You know, all we could really say for sure with this guy who went missing as a child, that you know, this was not a situation where his parents did it. You know, that's really all we could say. Being that his brother was there and saw it happen, it wasn't his mother or anybody known to him who took his brother. All we would be able to say is that the family didn't do it. However, we know that a lot of the time family does do it, or people who really know the family well. So I really can't even begin to guess. Percentages wise, I don't think that we've gotten to the point that we've covered enough child disappearance to say that yes, definitely one of those children was taken. A child was taken and raised as a different person with a new name. You know, if we were up to 1,000, of course, we only covered 350 disappearances. But say that we had covered 1,000 child disappearances, then I would say statistically probably. Then I would say, yeah, probably some of those kids were taken and raised by other people. But given that we've only covered 350 disappearances total, and of that total, how many are children? 35 or something? 40, 50? It's just not enough children yet for me to say that surely one of them was taken and raised as a different person. That's the way I look at it, although that there is the possibility. So what a story. Every time I hear this, I cry. D says, such good news. It's great news for kids like Logan Tucker, Summer Wells, and even Sebastian Rogers. Yeah, I guess there's hope. Certainly. But you can certainly understand under these circumstances why you thought, you could believe, well, this kid was taken and murdered the next day. What's still up in the air is, why did this happen? Was the woman who took this child ended up being his mother? How did she explain this? What did she tell other people? I would love to know these types of things, but I don't know if we ever will. It would be interesting to know all of that. And I think what's also interesting, let me look up here and see something one more time. Hold on a second. Let's see here. I think he was like 77 years old or something. So he's 80 now. He was taken in 1951, so he would have been 7 years old. What's interesting to me about this is that you would think at 7 years old that he would remember that he has another family out in California. So I have to admit for myself, when I think about child disappearances, usually it gets like 5 years old. You start getting younger than 5 years old, and I can start understanding how children might not remember that if they get abducted that they had a prior family. But you get up to 7 years old, and you think that he would remember, I was hanging out with my brother, and then this woman who spoke Spanish came along, and then I never saw my brother again, and why is that? I wonder. And I would wonder why, he wouldn't keep asking that question even when he got older. So these are answers we don't have. Will we ever have them? I don't know. At least not. There may be answers. I'm guessing the FBI and police have asked him about all this. Surely, if I can think of it, they can think of these questions. I just don't know if we'll ever get these answers publicly, unfortunately, because I would be fascinated to know what those answers would be. Yeah, the mother died before she found all of this out. Yeah. It's bad. I hope not for Summer Wells, because that case has my heart. Yeah. Okay. So that's a good story, and luckily that got resolved before he died, and it kind of brings back Mary Jane Van Gilder, who of course died well before she was ever identified by Adam Turner. Lisa says, that reminds me of Stephen Stamer, who was abducted at age 7, was told his parents didn't want him anymore. Maybe that happened, Lisa. Maybe this kid was told, oh yeah, we took you because your parents didn't want you anymore. I guess it's possible. But really, nothing's been public about this, so I don't know. All we know is it's been solved once again through DNA. All right, let's move on to this story. This story is just as crazy, not maybe as crazy as it gets, but it certainly is crazy with a capital C. Sheriff shoots and murders judge. A small Kentucky town is still reeling after a longtime sheriff was accused of shooting and killing a judge at the county courthouse on September 19th. in an act of shocking violence that has left many questions unanswered. State police said that Sheriff Sean Steins, 43 years old, killed the district judge Kevin Mullins, 54, after an argument in the judge's chambers. Steins turned himself in, was arrested at the scene, and now faces first-degree murder charges. My understanding, I don't know if it's in this article, but that, he went in there, they heard arguing, they heard the shot, and he came out with his hands up. He didn't try to flee the scene or anything. As soon as he came out of that room, he was like, all right, I did it. Yep, here you go. The motive for the shooting remains unclear, leaving the town of Whiteburg with a population of 1,700 wondering what happened between the two elected officials. The community is small in nature, and we're all shook, the Kentucky State Police Trooper Matt Gayhart said at a press conference on the evening of September 19th, the day of the shooting. We know that it was an argument between the two that led up to it, but exactly what transpired prior to the shots being fired, those are still things we're trying to get answers to. Multiple residents told news outlets that Steins was a beloved longtime member of the community and wondered what led to the outburst. Steins and Mullins had been friends and worked at the county courthouse together for more than a decade. Steins was recently deposed from a federal investigation involving a former deputy who pled guilty to raping and coercing a woman in the courthouse. Ben Fields, the former deputy, was sentenced to 6 months in jail, nearly 7 years probation as part of a plea deal. Fields was fired in 2022 as the allegations were going through court. The woman at the center of the case, in addition to the estate of a second woman who made similar allegations against Fields when she was alive, but has since died, sued Steins for not appropriately investigating the allegations. So there were allegations made against this deputy, and the sheriff did not want to investigate his own deputy, so it is alleged. A defense attorney for Steins in the lawsuit said that he at all times acted in good faith and exercised reasonable care and skill in effectuating his duties as required by law. On September 16th, 3 days before the shooting, Steins was deposed in the case. Mike Watts, a circuit court clerk, told local TV station WKYT that the sheriff and the judge had lunch together right before the shooting. The police have yet to say what the argument that led to the shooting was about. Police close to Steins said the alleged shooting was out of character and were shocked to hear the accusation that he murdered Mullins. You couldn't find a better person on the face of the earth than Nikki Steins. I don't know what happened, said Patty Woodha, the district judge who preceded Mullins, who was a friend of Steins. I know Steins' character, and I know there had to be something that did it. I just could not believe that it just went in and shot him for no reason. Bill and Josephine Richardson, a couple who lived in the town for more than 50 years, told the Louisville Courier-Journal that Steins was well-liked in the community, and two people they spoke to said Steins wasn't himself earlier in the week before the shooting. Now, you should know this is how the internet works. Now, when this happened, this is why I tell all of you, you shouldn't go to Reddit and places like this where anybody can post anything at any time. I know a lot of you love going over there because it's like soap opera central. But when this story first came out, the story was that the sheriff shot the judge because the judge was raping children. That's the story that made it onto the interwebs originally. We now know that it's pretty much the opposite. That the judge wasn't doing this. That instead, it was one of the sheriff's own deputies had gotten in trouble for raping a woman. And it seems that the sheriff himself didn't want to look into this too much, allegedly. And then for some reason, then the sheriff shot this judge. That's crazy. I mean, this is, of course, this is, to me, this is way crazier than that story that we have out of Las Vegas where Jeff German, a local reporter, was doing stories about this elected official and the problems in that particular office. And if you don't know, that guy was found guilty, although it seems there's going to be appeal or whatever else. But, and that guy tracked Jeff German down and murdered him and tried to get away with it. This story is way crazier than that one. You know, as a reporter, when you start, well, reporting the truth on people, sometimes bad things happen. You know, you get a lot of threats and all sorts of things. But with this, to me, this is like 1,000, a million times crazier and unexpected. So what am I supposed to think about this? You know, you hear all these great things about the sheriff. You know, and I really don't even think that this rises to the level of, you know, he shot the judge because he thought that his, you know, his reputation would be tarnished. You know, a good way to tarnish your reputation: shooting a judge for seemingly no reason. That's a good way to tarnish your reputation. So even if, you know, the sheriff Steins thought that he did do a pretty good investigation of his deputy, there's still no reason for him to shoot the judge. There's no reason to do that. So what then? You know, a guy who just lost his mind. Was there something about Sheriff Steins that people didn't know about? Did he have anger management issues? Did he have some sort of mental health issue or something that nobody knew about, or whatever else? I really haven't read anything that there have ever been any charges against him, as far as, for example, roughing any suspects up or anything like that. Of course, you hear about that all the time these days. Doesn't seem like there's anything like that. It does. I have it in my notes here. I will tell you this. This continues me along the path of thinking that we do have a law enforcement problem in the United States. I've been talking to this topic with my buddy Dave from college. I've known him for like 35 years now. We went to Grove City together. We graduated together. And he was the guy, if you'll remember, in 2022 when I went to Illinois to play disc golf. I stayed at his house and everything. And this is a topic that I bring up with him once in a while. And I've even told him about my experiences over the last 8 years of doing this podcast, of how my viewpoint on law enforcement has changed. And you can add this sheriff shooting judge and murdering him to that pile. Because we have to remember, how many regular people out there are shooting judges? I mean, it happens. But once again, when you're in the judging business, that maybe some family member gets ticked off with a judge, or even a suspect himself or herself is upset with how a judge is doing his business or her business, we shouldn't be too surprised if somebody loses their mind and tracks down a judge and shoots the person. Shouldn't be surprised by that. It happens. Not very common. But that is like, I'm not saying it necessarily makes sense, but we understand it. Wouldn't do it, but we understand it. This is neither understandable or, it doesn't make any sense seemingly, and we don't understand it either. And as I've also told my buddy Dave, I have to admit that I think, at least here in the United States, how do I put this? Maybe certain groups of people in the United States who have been complaining about law enforcement for decades, maybe they've had more of a point than maybe the rest of us have thought. Maybe. This is, I will tell you, if I'm going to talk about a topic on here, I have to talk about it honestly. And I'm being very honest with you. This is one of the first thoughts that goes through my head when I read a story like this. Maybe disadvantaged groups, poor people, certain minorities, people who live in certain areas, on and on and on. Maybe they've had more of a point, not a total point. Maybe they've had a little bit more of a point than, like I said, the rest of us realize. The rest of us who don't fall into those particular groups. And I will even say within my own life, I've been harassed twice by police for no good reason. Twice. And of course, I'm just your average white guy. So, this is what comes to mind. Are we ever going to, it just might have been he just lost his mind. It very well could be the sheriff just felt very close to this deputy and thought the deputy got shafted, and then he was being drugged into it and just lost his mind. And this happens. There are shootings that happen like this. People lose their mind, use their guns. The gun is right there. Boom, somebody's dead. And there are a certain amount of shootings involving police where, they're struggling with a suspect or something, and even though they're not in mortal danger, they grab their gun anyway and shoot. And it very well, maybe the judge and this guy were in a fight. Nobody else was there. We only have ear witnesses. We don't have eyewitnesses. All people did was hear what happened. They weren't there. So it'll be interesting to see where this all goes. This is another reason, though. I think, yes, if you get pulled over, don't do what Tyreek Hill did down with the Miami Dolphins a couple weeks ago. And, they pull him over. He's going way over the speed limit. What's he do? He doesn't want to get out of the car. He puts his window up. Don't do that stuff. Now, granted, did that one cop go over the top? Yes, he did. But if you want to have a hard time with police, do what Tyreek Hill did on that video. But I would also say that I continue to say this, not just about police, but a lot of different groups of people that we have been taught to respect in Western culture. We have to be very, very careful when we put professions up on pedestals. We have to be very, very careful, because it very well may be that a lot of people within that profession don't deserve it. In addition, showing too much, overt respect to a profession instead of to individuals, well, sometimes the human ego can't take it. This goes back to that old saying, when going back to the Roman times, when gladiators or the Roman soldiers would come back from a battle and, they've won and everything, that there would be people walking along with them, reminding them, you are but mortal. You are but mortal. You're getting all these adulations, but you are but mortal. You are but mortal. We don't do that kind of stuff these days. All certain groups do, all they do is get the adulation, and we should have that opposite side. Yes, but you're just a human. So, I just worry about the human ego cannot take overt adulation. It goes directly to our heads. Something. Let's see here. Sarah says it's extremely touchy subject. I would not want to be a judge. There are many law enforcement officers that feel they're above the law. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Okay, Sarah. I appreciate how you seem open to really considering and hearing about various viewpoints, Stephanie says. I'm just looking for the truth, Stephanie. That's all I'm doing. Thank you. The city where I reside is known for police corruption. Deborah says, ditto. Rockford, is it really crazier compared to what went on among law enforcement agencies in the civil rights era? How about among urban authorities when cities like New York and Chicago were growing up? You know, Rockford, I agree with you. You know, we have all these videos or film, I guess, that's turned into video of police using water cannons and hoses on minorities, on blacks and things. You know, not maybe within my lifetime. I mean, I was born in 1970, but certainly within my dad's lifetime, who was born in 1936. Certainly within my siblings' lifetimes, who were all born, well, let's just say, at least going back to the early 1950s, you know. And Charlie, there were tons of dirty cops in young towns, Akron and Ohio. You would know, Charlie, having grown up there, Robert. I think it's always been going on, but the cameras and internet made it more widely. No, you very well may be right. Schenectady from Place Beyond the Pines. Okay, Sarah, thank you for letting us know where you are. I surely support the idea. You get pulled over by police, you do what they say. All right, 100%. 100%. But I think from a public point of view, from us as just speaking for my country, the United States, I think we've gone too crazy. We've gone way over the top when we start showing professions overt respect. And I mean all of it. I don't think these people can take it. And I'm not sure that a lot of people within those groups deserve it. You want to recognize people as individuals for what they do, I get it. But when it comes to professions, it's not something I can get with. Too many people would take advantage of that. Rockford, the Kentucky case makes me think of Harvey Milk and Don White in San Francisco. Now, that was crazy. I know about that. I was just talking with somebody about that recently, Rockford. That's weird. Oh, yeah, Rockford, that was actually a trivia question from like a month ago regarding that. Yeah, it was a trivia question. Stephanie, yeah, this is what I mean, that you look for the truth by hearing things out instead of looking for reinforcement of specific ideas. Stephanie, I wake up every day looking for honest men and women. That's the truth. Hey, Sarah, I went to Union College, phone memory 69. All right, Rockford. So that is that story. Will we ever know why I did it? Maybe we will, maybe we won't. Once again, I feel obligated to just touch upon this. I would not expect any movement to be made on the murder of Suzanne Morphew anytime soon. The DA who was responsible for this has lost her job because she was doing a bunch of things she shouldn't have been doing, including communicating with a certain YouTube channel. What was the name of the channel? She was leaking information, if you can believe it. I should be so fortunate to have DAs leaking information to me. State regulators allege that soon after Morphew was arrested, this woman, last name Stanley, began texting the host of Profiling Evil YouTube channel about the case. After the charges were made public, she sought to provide information about the case to the host after the host questioned the criminal complaint against Morphew. After the host floated a theory online that Morphew strangled his wife in a hot tub, Stanley texted him to shoot it down and told him that the tub looked like it had not been used in a long time. But keep on spinning ideas in your brain, Stanley texted. Stanley then appeared on the YouTube show on August 30th, 2021, despite reservations from fans who saw promotions about the interview. On the show, she discussed the public information about the case, the process of a preliminary hearing, and how her office did not get the full case file until after Morphew was arrested. It's all, once again, what's going on? Now, I will tell you that my assistant, Sherifff, was the one who told me about all of this. And the first thing that came to my mind is this DA Stanley. I'm a DA, but what I really want to be is a YouTube star. This is what it sounds like to me. And this is also something that I am concerned about. in a lot of different professions in life, that people are doing only taking up certain professions so they can eventually use that profession to be some sort of podcast or whatever else. If you're going to go into the profession, why don't you just take that seriously? I'm the one who got into podcasting. I'm taking this seriously. You got into being a lawyer. You take that seriously. We all stick to our own things and everybody will be fine. But I am convinced these days, given, we have influencers and everything else, too many people are becoming lawyers and pilots and cops and everything else. They're not doing it because they're motivated to do that profession. They're only doing it so they can hopefully spin that into being some sort of, star online. I'm absolutely convinced of it, and it sucks. Just keep in mind, I'm not being a hypocrite here. I am a podcaster. This is what I do. All right, let's go to, so if you hadn't heard about that, yeah, she's in big trouble. So I would not expect any movement on the Morphew case anytime soon. Probably not even in 2025. All right, for Friday, we are going across the state of Florida to Jacksonville for the disappearance of Robert Torrance McLaughlin. He's also known as Francis. The guest uses the name Francis during the interview as well. I say Rob and Francis, but she also goes between each name. He disappeared on September 25th, 2017, so we're coming up on the 7-year anniversary in a couple days. And his roommate, Bella, who is actually originally from, I think, the Netherlands and lived here in the United States for a while, was his roommate, and she is now back in Europe. She is the guest. And Robert had gotten hit by a car a few years before he went missing, had some pain issues, some memory issues. And at the time, Bella was working nights, and she had left the evening before Robert was there. Everything was fine. She comes back the next morning. She just took for granted that he was there, being that his car was there. But then he had missed an appointment that day. Robert's mother had called her. Hey, where's Robert? Well, I thought he was here. She goes and checks his room. He's not there, even though his car is there. And they quickly discover that Rob is missing, and he has never been seen again. Now, what you might want to check out before Friday is Bella actually did her own podcast, just a few episodes regarding all of this that you should check out. I think it's on iTunes, and I know for sure it's on Spotify. So if you want to do a search on Spotify for like Rob Torrance McLaughlin and the disappearance, something like that, you will find the recordings that Bella made. But she is the guest. Very interesting woman. Enjoyed interviewing her. Did a fantastic interview. And you will hear her this Friday. Once again, Robert Torrance McLaughlin, Jacksonville, Florida. He disappeared September 25th of 2017, so almost 7 years exactly ago. And the roommate, Bella, is the guest. So that's all I got for tonight. What a show. I did get it all done, pretty much. Got the headline stuff done, I guess. I maybe gave the DA trouble thing a short thrift, but the other stuff I covered pretty well. Talked a lot about Steve Panky letters and some other things. That's all I got. Thank you so much, everybody tuning in. Give this video a thumbs up. Spread the word. Consider switching from Apple Podcasts to Spotify. And thank you for the very generous contribution from Kelly tonight. And you all hear me this Friday. Good night, everyone. Keep your heads on swivels. Charlie, say hi to the kids for me. Stay safe out there. Good night.